guys in the dark.
I'm a single Christian woman in my 20s, and since I don't have many friends in my local church, I decided to sign up to a website where I would make friends online. Some of the site members also used it for purposes of dating, which was okay with me as I was open to the possibilities. Soon I met a guy there who seemed nice, and we had some interests that were in common. After a few months of the friendship, we began to Skype since we lived far away from each other, so that we would not have to meet in person. We began chatting, and he seemed okay, but every now and then he would pause, go quiet, and just stare into the webcam. When I told him that it was creepy and asked why he was doing it, he replied that he enjoyed sharing the silence. I wasn't sure if it was normal, since around the same time I was busy dating someone else. I avoided the guy for several months. However, when I broke up with my ex, I was feeling lonely and decided that I wouldn't mind chatting to a friend to take my mind off of things. The guy happened to be the only person available. We ended up chatting every couple of days for about 2 weeks, and I even started getting used to the uncomfortable silence and staring when things turned weirder. During our conversations, I found out that the guy was in his 30s and still a virgin, and we both agreed that we believed in sex only after marriage. So it came to me as a surprise when one day he confessed that he has a fetish for girls in school uniforms and asked me if he could send me an erotic schoolgirl outfit with a very short miniskirt because he wanted to see me wearing it. I said no, since I don't like wearing revealing clothing. Another time he showed up in his bed on the webcam, only wearing his underwear, and began to ask me more dirty questions. I just laughed and made a few jokes, then tried to change the subject. However, he was not very responsive to the conversation, instead preferring to stare at his screen into the webcam, grinning while making repetitive motions with his hand under the bed cover. I didn't want to see it, so I made an excuse, and then left. I would have completely stopped chatting to him after that, but the next day, and the day after, he repeatedly texted me, wanting to go onto the webcam. Since I was bored and lonely, I asked him to promise me that he wouldn't be naked and do dirty things. He agreed to this. For a couple of days, we managed to carry on chatting, but soon after, he did it again, and this time it was much worse. First, he asked me to touch myself and send him a recording of it. I refused, explaining to him that in case my computer ever gets hacked, I do not want such things to be seen anywhere on the internet. "Oh, but you don't have to make a video. I just want to listen to the noises that you make," he replied. Again, I refused, saying that it made me uncomfortable, but he would not take no for an answer. He took off his underwear and began touching himself, as if he was stroking a pet, while grinning at me with a big, creepy smile. I told him that I had to go, and terminated the video call. That same evening, I sent him a long message explaining why I don't think that we would be compatible with each other, and said that I found him very disrespectful, and I want to stop seeing him. He responded saying that I'm stuck in the past, only thinking about my ex who used me, even though the guy had no idea what went on between me and my ex. At that time I got angry, and told him not to speak to me again about it. So I really hope that this pervy guy does not try to contact me ever again. Okay, look. We all have our bad date stories. We all have had bad experiences that to us are the worst dates in history. But I'm a realist, and I'm aware that my stories probably pale in comparison to a lot of others out there. And thankfully, my crazy dating woes are probably funny in hindsight. But I couldn't resist sharing this one, because while I can now laugh my ass off at what has happened, at the time this occurred, I probably thought this was the worst moment of my life. Looking back, it was probably the most laughable moment of my life. I met a guy named Dave on Match. He and I were both rather busy with careers, so the fact that we talked maybe once or twice a week was fine for both of us. As time passed, things progressed, and we got to know each other pretty well. Needless to say, I was more and more comfortable with him each time we got on the phone or chatted on Skype. Since we Skyped about 50% of the time, this gave me a great chance to actually see him interact with me, and I must say, he was easy on the eyes to boot. After about 2 months had gone by, We finally got our schedules to sync up, so we could meet without interruptions. Dave lived about 1 block from a pretty cool hotspot in town, so we thought that it would be a good idea to stick close to home, since I lived only a mile from him as well. Dave suggested that I meet him at his place so that we could get acquainted, sit by the pool in his apartment complex, and just chit-chat for a little bit before heading out. I thought that this was a good idea because, honestly, he was very polite, easygoing, and very low pressure. He didn't give any indication that I had anything to fear or worry about, and after the 2 months of talking, I didn't have any problems meeting with him at his place, especially since we were going out at the pool and did not really spend time inside his place. I was cool with that. My only slight red flag was that after time, the conversation didn't really get kinky. But he was starting to throw around the sexual innuendos on occasion and made hints towards things that he liked sexually. Okay, that's no big deal. I get it. He's a guy, and I have to admit, I'm no prude. So while I didn't allow the conversation to get too crazy, I played along, but casually. I guess my playing along gave Dave the wrong impression, and here's why. I arrived at Dave's place for our date, got to his door, and was pretty excited to finally meet him. Well, I knocked, and it took him about 30 or 40 seconds to answer the door, which is actually quite a long time since his apartment really wasn't that big. To my amazement, Dave was completely naked, but, well, for the lack of better terms, was pleasuring himself as he answered the door. And I don't mean that he was just starting to do it either. He was actually very close to finishing. Again, for the lack of better term, he finished about 3 seconds after opening the door, right in front of me. He let out this grunt that could be heard a block away, and that's not all he let out. I have heard stories that come close to this one, but never this explicit. I think my jaw fell halfway to the floor. I was stunned, amazed, and slightly frightened. All I could say was, "Are you kidding?" I think I was 2 steps towards the door when I uttered those words, and I actually didn't hear Dave say another word. I just heard his door close. I got in my car and bolted from the scene. He texted me about 10 minutes later, telling me he had been so turned on by our conversations that he was beyond excited and aroused by me that he just couldn't help himself. He also mentioned that he thought that I would enjoy what I saw. Needless to say, while this was something that I wouldn't mind watching or seeing after I know someone much better, it was totally inappropriate at the time. I let him know that and asked him never to contact me again. Thankfully, he didn't. From now on, I think I'll stick to meeting in public for the first date. Well, I thought by using a more popular, expensive dating site, the one you see on TV all the time, that I'd get a better class of person. Someone looking for a relationship versus a hookup. I was totally wrong. I met Keith right before Christmas. He broke his leg a month later. I, of course, helped take care of him and spent a lot of time with him. I had a nagging feeling that we weren't right for each other. He was very clingy and seemed a little bit off. I had a huge St. Patrick's party at home with about 50 friends, and he came. Since he was finally off crutches, he was meeting most of my friends and my family for the first time. He got so drunk, I had to put him to bed by 9 o'clock. I checked on him several times. The first time, he was puking on the floor without a bowl. The second time, I could smell poo in my room. I left very quickly. And the third time, he was passed out naked across my bed, and I had to cover him with a sheet, just in case someone went in there for some reason. He woke up at about 2:30 in the morning. He woke me up from the couch and wanted me to go in my room and sleep with him. It was gross. I told him no nicely and said that we would talk in the morning. He kept me awake until about 5:30, bothering me, crying, and trying to manipulate me into coming into the bedroom. Around 8:30 in the morning, I woke up and had to physically threaten him to get him to leave. He then proceeded to call me 70 times that day, with 15 voicemails, 20-something text messages. I ended up blocking him from Facebook and my cell phone. It took me a week to completely clean my room between the puke and all that nasty crap that was left on the rugs, wall, and the bed. He then started emailing me at home and at work. I then found his boxers and a towel of mine hidden away in my room 2 weeks later. It's been almost 2 months, and he's still trying to reach out. I had to be horribly mean in an email to him, report him to the dating site, and then report him to the local PD, because you just never know. I think that I'm pretty awesome, but I'm not that awesome. Hopefully this is the last time that I've heard from him. To top this off, this guy happens to be 40 years old. The night that we met was supposed to be the night that I killed myself. It was a cool fall evening, just warm enough for a light jacket. I was at a horse sale that I went to every month. Per usual, my friend and I checked out the tack lots and horses that were up for auction. Throughout the past few months, I had dealt with a lot of pain and hardship. My heart was as broken as it could be. All of my passion for the things that I enjoyed was gone. The girl that I once knew wasn't there anymore. I walked a long, dark road of depression, alone. I had no self-esteem anymore. I felt I was worth nothing. I planned to end it all after the sale. I was watching horses in the outdoor ring when one caught my eye. My friend was looking for a horse, and it seemed like it might be a match for her. I slipped into the ring to talk to the owner. When he turned around and looked at me, it was like the world stopped turning. The horses around me were in slow motion. Our eyes met, and every bone in my body went cold. I asked to try the horse out. He let me. Later on, my friend bought the horse. In the end, the horse didn't work out, but that's another story for another time. The owner was supposed to deliver the horse to them the next day. I didn't catch his name. I couldn't sleep that night, but the fact was, I was still here. I had to find out who that guy was. The next day I was out fishing on a river with my brother when my friend texted me his name, Matt. She had written a check out to him, so it all worked out. It wasn't long before I found him on Facebook, and it wasn't long before he messaged me and asked me on a date. I'll never forget that day. I spent the next week or so house-sitting for a high school friend. I invited him over for dinner towards the end of the week. I'd never been so nervous in my life. I had no idea what I was getting myself into. I made shrimp pasta and vodka sauce that night. We clicked. He ended up letting me take his truck for a spin. When we got back to the house, we were sitting in the dark, talking, when he pulled me in for our first kiss. My heart had melted. I remember my eyes filled with tears because it all felt so right. I swore for so long that it was right. He stayed with me until 5 a.m. He was allergic to cats, otherwise he would have just stayed the night. The next few months seemed to be of pure bliss. The sex was phenomenal. The money that he blew on me, spoiling me, was crazy. I got everything that I could ever want. His family was loaded, and he wasn't afraid to show it. It wasn't until the honeymoon phase was over that I started noticing things. An ex-girlfriend reportedly texted him and told him that he had given her chlamydia. He then gave it to me. I was never skinny enough. My hair was never the right color. I didn't have any tattoos. I only had a few piercings. I was a waitress, drove a truck. I posted too many selfies. I texted him too much. I couldn't satisfy him anymore. He began dropping me off at the gym to work out while he ran errands, just about every single day. He became even more obsessed with porn than normal. A Tumblr blog, the whole 9 yards. He killed all of my hopes and dreams, one by one. If we were to be together, I could never ride racehorses for a living like I had wanted to my whole life. He started spending hours on end playing video games when I came over. He had used me for what he needed, and he was done with me. He taught himself how to build computers. He started building guns in the basement, and fabricating and 3D printing some of his own parts for them. That should have been a red flag. About a month went by of him ignoring me, him telling me that I wasn't enough, and showing me pictures and videos of girls that he actually wanted. He told me that my family hated me. Everyone hated me. I became depressed once again. I started working more and more hours just to keep myself from thinking. One night I had finally had a mental breakdown. I told him about the night that we met, what I was supposed to have done that night, how he had saved me, and how much I loved him. His answer? He left me. The next morning he woke up and texted me saying that he had no feelings for me and I could come get my things. My world had fallen apart. I lost 25 pounds. I didn't eat for weeks. My parents became very concerned and didn't let me close my door. My dad got me a job riding racehorses. It started to look up. About a month later, I landed myself in the ICU with a severe concussion. When I woke up, I thought Matt and I were still together. I got on my phone to tell him that I was hurt when I saw the messages from the breakup. I fell apart again. A whole year had passed. I remained single. Matt had a few girlfriends. Somehow, I managed to keep myself together. At least it looked like that. I worked myself to death, bought a new car, and moved out at 20. I worked 2 jobs and about 75 hours a week. I kept myself pretty busy. I had my own Adderall, alcohol, weed cocktail that kept myself afloat. I'll be the first to admit that the drinking did start to get a bit out of hand. I was at my parents' visiting when I got a friend request from Matt on Facebook. I must have refreshed the page 10 times. I couldn't believe what I was seeing. Despite my better interest, I had accepted it. He messaged me a little while later. He had made it through the police department and was now a county sheriff. He gave me a pretty lame apology, but I somehow accepted it. I knew in my heart that I wasn't over him. Not one bit. He took me to dinner that night and spent the night at my apartment. He actually made some good points about why he ended it with me. I started to forgive him. I shed a lot of tears that night. We started hanging out like old times again, but the same problems started to arise. Once again, I wasn't good enough for him. But there was something different about him this time. He became obsessed with picking locks. We'd be laying in bed watching a movie, and he'd be on his phone watching lock-picking videos. He complained about my dog a lot. He always joked that he would go missing one day. A few more weeks went by. It seemed like every once in a while his mask would vanish, but just for a second. I should have known that something was off when he sent me a text complaining about somebody dying in his arms at work. The body stunk, he said. He started driving like a nut. I vividly remember us going 163 miles per hour on a back road in his Mustang. He watched my reactions the whole time. He hardly looked at the road. We went to New York City for a few days. He took a gun into one of the World Trade Centers and got us kicked out. We got into a fight over the phone one night because he called me an explicit name. The next day, we met up to talk. During my drive to the meeting place, I was overwhelmed with a feeling of dread. I knew it was the end of us, but it was more than that. I wasn't sad. I was just frustrated. We talked for about 20 minutes, and I don't think his eyes ever wandered from my face. His 2 dark brown eyes shot through me like bullets. He started talking through his teeth, telling me that no one would ever love me, that he was in cahoots with my friends, and that they hated me too. I was going nowhere in life. The hair on the back of my neck stood up. His eyes were completely dead. It's something that I can never unsee. The way he was looking at me just gave me chills. The voice in my head started talking. Steph, get out of the car. Get out of the car now. I trusted my gut and got out. I hurried to my car, jumped in, and immediately locked it. I saw him staring at me in my rearview mirror. I drove straight to my parents' house, bawling. They were terrified. The next day, my boss told me that Matt had apparently been driving back and forth past my work, going outrageous speeds, almost like he was showing off. But the fact was, he lived almost an hour from there and had no reason to be there. I reported him to his precinct, who said that they could take care of it. I didn't hear from Matt for a very long time. I started to move on and feel like I was myself again. Finally, I started dating my current boyfriend. For the record, he is the best and most loving man that I've ever met in my life. Matt drunk texted me one night. I told him to just leave me alone. I had since moved an hour away since we broke up. I had started to feel safe yet again. One night my boyfriend was on his way over when he called to tell me that somebody had been tailgating him for 30 minutes. It was Matt. He made it almost to my house before he finally turned off. I have seen him a few times since, but thankfully he has kept his distance. He's now a Department of Transportation cop, and how funny it is that my now fiancé drives a tractor trailer.
I was the one at fault here. I was in nursing school when I got an email one morning about a life insurance policy that was written out in my name. I was confused at first, because I was a relatively healthy 26-year-old woman, but it didn't take long to figure out that my wife at the time did it. Besides my wife and myself, she was the only other person to know my social security number and all the necessary information that was needed. She was the reason that I went to nursing school, constantly worked every double or every shift available at work. She was horribly abusive in every way imaginable. I was too afraid to leave her or call the police about it. To give you more of a perspective of the kind of person that she was, she would tell me every single day to go out into the woods and shoot myself. She would make me stand against a tree while she held a revolver against my forehead and played Russian roulette. She would give me a $20 a month allowance when I was the one making all of the money. And when I tried to get more for a gift or something, she'd maybe give me $1 more. She became so controlling to the point of tracking the mileage in my car to make sure that I wasn't going anywhere besides work and home. She would screen all my calls, so in order for me to call my family, I had to make up an excuse to leave the ranch, talk to them in secret, with specific instructions not to call me back. I would call them, and then delete all the call histories. This list is definitely not all that she put me through during our 4 years of marriage, but that's another story for another time. It'll be 6 years later this month from when I left her. I'm still not healed, and sadly I will never be fully at peace until she is gone and out of this world. Until then, I have to focus on myself and deal with the nightmares and night terrors as often as they come.
My ex-girlfriend had decided to stop by for a visit. I had just eaten enough Chinese food at a buffet to be near passed out. I was lying on the blow-up mattress, and I heard her growl, "You son of a bitch!" And suddenly, boom, she punched me in the teeth. I asked her what the fuck her problem was. At this point, I was broke, so I didn't have any furniture. Everything was neatly placed in my room, including all of my condoms. She had counted them, and noticed that one was missing from the last time that she had visited. I scrambled up, and she spit in my face. I told her to just leave, and walked to the door. Then she opened up the cabinet, took out the toaster oven, and she threw it at the side of my head. My head was ringing. Glass was all over the floor from the broken oven door. Blood is trickling down my head. I was panicked. I didn't want to hurt her, but she had to leave immediately. I told her that I would call the cops if she didn't leave at once. The whole time in between assaulting me, she was frantically glancing around the room for any other signs that I was cheating, even though I was single. And for stuff to assault me with, of course. I opened up the door to encourage her exit, and she started screaming at me. She said that she'd get everyone in the neighborhood thinking that I was assaulting her. I pleaded with her to please just leave. She started tearing into the bare skin of my chest with her nails, grabbing, pinching, and pulling at me. I forced her out of the door, and then I locked it. She started bashing at the windows. Finally, she had gotten in her car, and she left. I had slid to the floor and called my parents. I was in complete shock, and I was sobbing. I hadn't experienced that kind of crazy in my life before. She had just attacked me in a fit of rage. I didn't want to hit her back. I just wanted to be left alone. This whole experience had me wondering about the mental problems that she has had, and that she was hiding the entire time that we were together. I was so afraid that she would do something crazy, like wreck her car to go and get revenge on me, or hurt my dog, or even call the police with a fake story. But thankfully it's been 5 years since that day, and it's pretty hazy now. It's hard to describe what a blur it was. I'd gone out on a date at Starbucks. It really didn't start off terribly. He was about 5 inches shorter than he claimed to be, but was also way cuter than his profile picture. So I felt like it all had balanced out. And to clear this, his actual height is a non-issue. Lying about it was kind of a downside to me. But when we actually started talking, I felt like all this dude wanted to do was prove how intellectual and different he was. Stroke 1. He said that he preferred to spend his money on experiences rather than things. I agreed with it, and started talking about my love for travel, at which point he had interrupted me to say that I probably still owned Uggs. And then suddenly he looks at my shoes to see if he was right. At that point, I realized that I didn't need to wait for 3 strikes. I immediately came up with an exit plan. I needed to pick up a gift for my niece at Sephora. He had followed me to the store, sharing his thoughts on makeup and opinions on girls who wear too much of it all the way. Needless to say, we didn't go out on a second date. My ex had cheated on me for about 6 months without me even knowing about it. We were in bed one night, and she rolls over and tells me to get out. I was in complete shock and had no idea what to do, so I just left. We had joint everything. She canceled my phone, took all the money that I saved out of my accounts, kept my dog that I had tried incredibly hard to get back. But most of all, she told her friends, my friends, her family, and my family all over social media that I choked her and beat her, and she left to save her own life. She even posted pictures of cuts and bruises that she got from a car accident online, saying that they were all from me. Her car had got broken into at a mall, and her stuff was stolen, and she told the police that it was me. After I proved to the police that I was working, they quickly looked the other way. After at least a year of trying to clear my name, I met the guy who she was cheating on me with. At first I wanted to tear his face off, but after he had bought me drinks, I found out that she did the exact same thing to him.
If you enjoyed this video, please subscribe, like, and hit the bell for notifications on future videos, and become a stalker of the night. And I'll see you next time.